Welcome to this talk on Yang Sheng, the pillars of good health and longevity, avoiding actions that do harm and actively promoting health. Life is unpredictable, as 2020 and now the beginning of 2021 has shown us all. Our health, well-being and death are the result of many factors. These factors include our inherited constitution, quality of prenatal care, the mother's nutritional status and emotional health and well-being during pregnancy, the environment we live in, and the levels of stress in our lives and work. Although many of these are not within our control, there is space for us to influence our health and well-being by our behaviour and lifestyle choices. Yang Sheng is probably one of the least known about and most important aspects of Chinese medicine. Simply put, it is the self-care aspect of traditional Chinese medicine. It is a lifestyle choice that allows the body to become a self-healing system of which you yourself are in charge. Where in Western medicine we wait until we are sick to see a doctor, in Chinese medicine the cultivation and nourishment of life was at the very centre of health care. In fact, the Chinese doctors of old were not paid when their families were sick. They were only paid when they kept them well. So they understood very well that medicine can only do so much and that prevention was better than cure. Living the Yang Sheng way puts you in the managerial position of your own health. And although Chinese medicine is a very ancient system, it is still very relevant today. There's a Chinese proverb that says, medicine can only cure curable diseases, and then not always. Medicine has its limits. Chronic disease is incurable. Most people who have a chronic disease will not be cured. Their condition is managed by medication to prevent worsening and to ease their symptoms. Chronic diseases today are mainly due to our modern lifestyle and poor diet. Diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and dementia are mainly prevalent in Western countries. The advantage of the practice of Yang Sheng is that it has a solid foundation of over 2,500 years of practice. From the earliest of times, in Chinese medical texts, there have been compilations on advice under the heading of Yang Sheng. The canon of the Yellow Emperor is full of stories of Huangdi asking Qibo, his physician, questions regarding health. Whether the Huangdi Neijing is a book based on legend or not, it has a very good way of explaining health issues. We have two versions in our home. One is a cartoon that I use for my children and grandchildren, and the other as a normal book to help me understand the tenets of Chinese medicine. So what determines health and longevity? Parental health and well-being, emotional health, nutritional status, and physical condition are all parts of our life that can help determine our health and longevity. If you look into the Chinese medicine tradition, they have the three treasures. I will cover the three treasures in a separate lecture. In this lecture, we will look at Jing, pre-heaven and post-heaven essence. Jing is stored in the kidneys and is of two kinds. Pre-heaven essence, the foundation of our constitution, which is handed down to us from our parents at the time of conception, modified during gestation. I will cover this subject in detail on a talk on Yang Sheng and pregnancy. Jing can never be increased, only used up. It has a major influence on our lives and innate health or lack thereof. However, post-heaven essence is the one we can work with during our lives by nurturing our health. Post-heaven essence is the energy we absorb and transform every day through breathing, eating, and drinking. The belief that our life length is finite runs through many cultures, whether it is called chi, prana, energy, or our life source. It all talks of the same thing, which in Chinese medicine is called jing. Each person is born with a supply of jing that is nourished. This essential or prenatal jing of itself cannot be added to and only decreases throughout our lives. When that jing is finished, then we die. Postnatal jing, however, we can add to and we can cultivate. Both types of jing mutually depend upon each other and are collectively known as kidney essence. Luckily, there is a lot we can do to work with our postnatal jing through our lifestyle choices. What determines the amount of jing we have and what decreases it? Jing is somewhat similar to DNA, and that it is handed down through generations and comes from our parental genes. Our jing, collectively, is stored in the kidneys because these are one of the first organs to develop. They are the home of our essence. The strength of our prenatal essence depends on many factors, which are ironically out of our control. For instance, the nutritional status of our parents when we are conceived, their emotional status, if they exercise or are they healthy, if they were young when we were conceived, will all dictate the level of jing handed down to a fetus. When an adult has strong essence, he has healthy bones and good muscle, a well-proportioned body and face. However, when the jing is weak, we see premature aging and greying of hair, poor memory, pain in the joints and bones, especially in the areas of the lower back and knees, dark circles under the eyes, and a lack of coordination. In a child, weak essence can be shown in slow growth, slow speech development, late eruption of teeth, and a lack of muscle tone. Children that have low jing reach puberty significantly later than their peers. In Chinese medicine theory, our jing should be respected, guarded, and not wasted. One of the greatest teachings of Oriental medicine and life cultivation is that jing can be replenished and restored, and even be increased on a constitutional level by those who know how to do so, whether this is done via herbal tonics, stress reduction techniques, teas, Tai Chi and Qigong. Our jing can be restored. Some things are out of our control. Things such as who our parents are, where we live, until we are adults, where we are born, if we are born into a country free from war and famine, or whether we have a nourishing childhood, or we are brought up in an environment of neglect and disinterest, whether we have adequate access to food and nutrition, are things that are beyond our control. However, there is one area that we do have control over, and that is our behaviour and our chosen lifestyle. Before studying Chinese medicine and nutrition, like many people, I didn't really think about why we became ill or what harms us. I had just assumed that illness was by chance and that some people became sick because they were unlucky and had pulled the short straw. However, when you look at how we live today and our environment, there is a lot around us that is unnatural and can be harmful. When we look at what harms us, such as our emotions, bad diet, and our working habits, there is a lot that we can have some degree of control over. Diet, reactions to stress, and what life throws at us. Our sexual practices, we have some degree of control over. Work and seasonal changes are things we need to work with and understand how they can impact our health, as the consequences of an unhealthy lifestyle often takes time to become obvious and manifest as symptoms, which means we can damage our health without knowing it until the symptoms become obvious, and this can take years. This is why living a healthy lifestyle and understanding and practicing life cultivation is so important. The first rule of Yang Sheng is to avoid behaviour that does harm. It is well known and accepted in the West that drinking in excess and smoking, along with recreational drugs and poor diet, along with physical inactivity, are damaging to long-term health. If we were to look at the opposite, we would probably list a wholesome diet, exercise, not drinking too much alcohol, and getting adequate rest as important contributions to promoting good health. However, in Chinese Yang Sheng teachings, the art of regulating the mind and emotions is considered more important. The ability to manage our minds and emotions and cultivate a positive mental state has been backed up by research conducted over the past few decades. We are emotional beings. The world around us and the thoughts in our own heads trigger emotional reactions all the time. We are encouraged into emotional responses through films, books, advertising, and television. The predominantly negative emotional content of many news programs can have a very subtle effect on us. There is new evidence that viewing habits can affect our thinking, political preferences, and even cognitive ability. In fact, life can be a roller coaster of emotions at its worst. Let's take a look at emotion. A Chinese saying, of all emotions, anger is the easiest to arouse and the hardest to control. Another Chinese saying is that anger speeds up aging and laughter makes you younger. Anger is probably the most dangerous emotional stress we can experience. It has a host of potentially damaging effects on the body. Many a film or play have been written about the consequences of decisions made in times of fury or excessive anger. Although emotions are a normal part of life and that we feel them on an everyday basis, it's not necessarily the emotion we feel at any one time, but how we react to feeling that emotion. It's important to know that we have to accept our emotions, as repression of emotion will turn into other things. The repression of anger will turn into frustration and resentment, and these two things can cause long-term damage. An acute bout of fury, intense anger, will generate intense heat in the body, causing yang energy to rise up and affect the chest or head, injure the lungs or the heart, and cause headaches or a very red face that is characteristic of people who are very angry. It causes blood pressure to increase and can result in a stroke. Rising yang energy can also cause problems in the sense organs of the upper body, such as the eyes and ears. Most emotions affect the body at a slower rate, but rage can have immediate consequences. In 1999, a Finnish study found that men who got angry most often were twice as likely to have a stroke than those who did not anger easily. The relationship between stroke and rage was confirmed when patients were interviewed within 4 days of a stroke, and they were asked what significant event had occurred during the 2 hours preceding the stroke. A bout of anger or negative emotion was the most commonly reported. It is quite amazing that these findings give weight to the Chinese idea that anger makes blood and qi rise to the brain. Anger and the heart. Angry adults are significantly more likely to suffer from coronary heart disease. This includes fatal heart attack than their more placid contemporaries. They are also more likely to have high blood pressure. Anger and hostility in men has been found to be a significant predictor for developing atrial fibrillation, an irregular and often abnormally fast heartbeat, and for suffering an early death. The harm caused by anger that sets in early in life is reflected in a 36-year study of over 1,000 medical students. Those prone to anger at the outset of the study were 6 times more likely to have had a heart attack by the age of 55 and 3 times more likely to have developed a heart or blood vessel disorder. Older, angrier men who are more prone to hostile emotion have been found to have poorer lung function, more rapid rates of physical decline than those who do not. The greater the hostility, the more severe the deterioration in lung function. People who are poor at controlling anger take longer to heal after suffering an injury. Anger and stress, including anxiety, depresses the immune function and will increase susceptibility to asthma, high blood pressure, upper respiratory tract infections, skin diseases, chronic fatigue, irritable bowel syndrome, and various psychiatric disorders. Children who are brought up having the natural assertiveness repressed by domineering parents or carers develop into adults who may be unable to experience or express anger at all. The lack of assertiveness, which is an underlying factor in being unable to express healthy anger, is not there. In response, these children can grow up into timid, constrained, and indecisive adults. It's important to understand that anger is a normal emotion that everyone will feel at some point in their life. It may be important to feel some anger if we need to assert ourselves or make a change. Never showing anger at all or always being angry are both ways we damage our health. A good way to deal with this is to make an anger inventory. Look at ways that you get angry so you can understand how to deal with that in a healthy manner. You need to look up what makes you angry, make a list, then try to understand where you feel the anger in your body. How often you get angry, daily, weekly, never. Do you deal with your anger in a healthy manner? Do you talk about it, or do you hold on to it and fume for hours, days, or weeks? Filling out a chart or just making a list on anger and what makes you angry, what pushes your buttons, can help you realize how often you get angry and if you are actually resolving these feelings or just hiding them and burying them deep within you. It's understandable how a negative emotion like anger can harm us. But what about positive emotions like joy? According to TCM, joy harms the heart. Good feelings, although beneficial to our health, can also be a cause of disease. You may wonder how joy may have any negative effects on one's body. It's not the emotion in itself that has the negative effect, rather it's excessive or extreme emotion of any kind that causes illness. Joy, when excessive or imbalanced, manifests as overexcitement, euphoria, or agitation. This temporary feeling of wonderfulness can often lead to a low feeling after. The risk is that we then begin to need this fix of joyfulness and find that without it, life becomes something that we just get through until our next fix or stimulating event. This can lead to many kinds of self-harming behaviours, from abuse of recreational drugs, alcohol, gambling, food, to risky sex and dangerous driving or violence. The saying that joy damages the heart actually means that excessive joy harms the spirit or the Shen, which is housed in the heart, and in actuality means an addiction to it can destroy our emotional stability and contentment, leading to anxiety, fear, and depression. Taking pleasure from the world around us and living in the moment is one way we can balance out our emotions. Living in the moment, also called mindfulness, is a state of active, open, and intentional attention on the present moment. seeking pleasure in what we are doing rather than how what we are doing might ultimately benefit us. When you become mindful, you realize that you are not your thoughts. You can become an observer of your thoughts from moment to moment without judging them. We can pay attention to the small things, notice the world around us, and perform random acts of kindness. An emotion that none of us are lucky enough to get through life without feeling. Another saying from the Yellow Emperor's classic is that when one is sad, chi dissipates. A saying from Yang Sheng in the 17th century is that grief harms the lung. It dissipates chi and can cause physical symptoms. Signs of the physical symptoms after grief include a shortness of breath, a weak voice, a dislike of speaking, easily catching colds, panic attacks, poor concentration, listlessness, or general weakness, daytime sweating or palpitations. William Shakespeare said, "Moderate lamentation is the right of the dead, and excessive grief the enemy to the living." Grief in and as of itself is an inevitable part of life. It is impossible to live without losing people, pets, places, or things that we love. This includes, as we age, facing letting go of our health and looks, our faculties, and ultimately our life. To experience grief in itself is not harmful. In fact, it's a necessary part of life, and recovery after something we love is gone helps us develop wisdom and understanding. It becomes a problem when the grief is excessive, when the trauma we have suffered is so severe that we cannot bear it, or when we hold on to grief for too long, or when we are imbued with a deep sense of sadness over many years. This excessive grief, according to Chinese medicine, causes our energy or our qi to sink and drain away, our shoulders to droop and our chest to collapse, and it is therefore said that it injures the lungs, the respiratory system, and depletes our vital energy. Excessive grief is associated with heightened risk of heart attack, cancer, being hospitalized for a serious health event, more disability days, and dramatic increases in drinking and smoking, or changes in the way we eat. Loss can take many other forms, not only bereavement. We may feel grief when a relationship ends, or when we lose something that is of value to us, such as a piece of jewelry, a beloved pet, or even a dream or vision we have that does not manifest. Dealing with grief. The normal stages we experience when we go through the grieving process are denial. It can't be happening. Anger, why me? Bargaining, depression, feelings of intense sadness, and then acceptance, it's going to be okay. Not all of these stages necessarily occur when we experience loss, and not always necessarily in this precise order. But grieving is a process, and once we have gone through this process, it is only then that we can move on. Fortunately, counselling is now widely available for bereavement or shock. There are a few questions we can ask ourselves to see if we are dealing with grief or sadness, and whether we are moving on from them, or whether we would benefit from some form of counselling to help us. You can ask yourself, do you regularly feel empty or sad? If you do, how do you deal with this? What kind of situations make you sad or bring on feelings of grief? Do you feel them anywhere in your body? And lastly, do you have any of the signs and symptoms what we mentioned earlier on retained grief or sadness? Grief is a part of the natural healing process and needs to be expressed. Worry or anxiety is thought to serve a useful evolutionary purpose.
It enables us to anticipate danger, difficulty, and help us plan strategies to deal with them. Like most things and most emotions, as long as it's held under control, moderate worry and anxiety help us deal more effectively and safely with the world we live in. It enables us to anticipate, rehearse, and respond effectively to things that happen around us, and then once we have done that, we are able to discard that worry and put it aside and move on. However, worry becomes problematic for some when it is excessive and they cannot free themselves from its grip. It might be that there is excessive anxiety about being late, appearance, body shape, hair, the way we dress, or worry about failure, being incompetent at work, or our peers thinking that we're not intelligent enough. Today, many people worry and are anxious regarding COVID-19, whether they will get sick or contact a deadly disease, to the extent that this worry is becoming habitual. The constant worry about COVID-19 is actually changing the way people behave in public, and there is a general fear that is permeating through society. I think that this constant worry over 2020 and now into 2021 has become an ever-present background noise in our lives, and each and every one will deal with it in their own way. We can only hope that it is dealt with in a beneficial way. The evidence for harmful effects of anxiety were demonstrated in a study of nearly 1,000 patients with heart disease. Those who experienced anxiety had twice the risk of dying prematurely compared to those who did not suffer from anxiety, a risk that increased to 3 times when the anxiety was combined with depression. Another study found that men with no history of coronary disease, but with a tendency to anxiety, were significantly more likely to have a heart attack within the next 12 years. What grief, worry, and anxiety share in common is that the sheer simplicity of the present moment, which is where we actually are living, is lost. I think the only response to deal with this is to teach ourselves to live in the present. My son spent quite a bit of time with Shifu Jackie in the mountains of Dongfeng, learning about Zen. His own conclusion, in his own words, at 11 years of age, was that Zen is living in the moment. Both fright and fear are normal and adaptive emotions. It is when they become chronic that they can begin to affect our health. Fright and fear are the emotions that pertain to the kidneys. These emotions deplete kidney qi and makes qi descend. Both prolonged fright or fear, or sudden fright or fear, will damage the kidney system and deplete the jing, causing symptoms such as involuntary urination in children, back issues, menstrual disorders in women, or sexual disorders. It is said that the best medicine begins with the harmonization of the 7 emotions. Stress is often referred to as a modern disease and can be a mixture of frustration, anxiety, worry, fear, and excessive thinking. And as such, it really is a mix of the classic 7 emotions that we have looked at on the previous slides. As you can see, this slide cartoon really resonates with me. Indeed, I think it summarizes my life up until I started studying naturopathic nutrition and Chinese medicine. As a mother of 7 children, including 1 who had Asperger's and 3 who had ADHD at various levels, I could say that I suffered from some stress. Especially as I'm so old, my children were born before screens were a household commodity. So how does stress affect the body? It is important to understand that stress can negatively affect virtually every bodily system. It can contribute to headaches and migraines, reduce sexual desire, chest pain, fatigue, muscular aches and pains, and premenstrual syndrome. It can also cause insomnia and digestive disorders. Stress can also underline diseases such as infertility for both men and women, and high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, and much more. So stress is something that we really need to become familiar with, and how it affects us, and how much stress we are actually under. For often stress can settle so deeply in our lives that we no longer notice it. There is a Chinese proverb that says the last person to discover water is the fish. It is much easier to modify and train our bodies through exercise, as this is something we have come to understand as part of our culture, the need to be fit, to be healthy. However, what is more difficult to understand, especially here in the West, is the value of respecting and cultivating our emotions. We are now living in a culture that demands instant satisfaction. A constant barrage of advertising wherever we go has whole generations of people craving things that they do not have, and many a time do not need, instead of enjoying what they do have. Our society is based upon consumerism. I have or I can buy, so I am happy. Therefore, the concept of regulating and respecting our emotions and our desires is deeply unfashionable. In fact, practically unheard of here. The easiest way to have some control over our emotions and our mind is to learn how to enjoy what we do have instead of what we do not. And maybe the most important one is learning to dwell in the present moment, to show gratitude, to give thanks for what we do have. Taoism and Chinese medicine have always had an understanding that diet is paramount to our health and longevity, and as such is recognized in its own right as a branch of medicine. In fact, in Beijing there are pharmacies that have restaurants upstairs. They are based upon traditional Chinese medicine practices. So you go in, a doctor will take your pulse, check you over, and recommend food for you according to what he has seen within your body via your pulse, tongue, and face. Chinese medicine teaches us that a balanced diet not only improves our physical health, but is also essential for our mental health and well-being. Many Chinese today are very aware that poor eating habits will diminish well-being and energy. I always remember our first China trip. We were staying in a small martial arts school and it was October. Very hot for us at 26 to 28 degrees, but for the people who lived in China, October was going into winter. And I remember being chastised for asking for ice lollies, as apparently it was not the season. It's also well known that when you go into a Chinese cake shop, you get given hot water with your cake, not a cold beverage. Cold beverages damage the stomach. But more about that later. Today we are lucky in that we do not have to deal with suboptimal nutrition. Malnutrition, however, is more of a problem, with a whole generation who are overfed yet undernourished, because they are fed the wrong types of food and many are being brought up on convenience foods. The most important thing you can do for a child's future health and happiness is to give them a diet of optimal nutrition. That is to say, nutrient-dense, fresh foods. According to figures from the Office for National Statistics, 1 in 10 children aged 5 to 16 has a clinically recognizable mental disorder, such as anxiety, depression, hyperactivity, or autism. Incidence of lifestyle diseases, such as type 2 diabetes or fatty liver disease, previously only seen in an overweight and unhealthy old adult, are now appearing in children in increasing numbers. In fact, the current generation of young people is the first that can be expected to live shorter lives than their parents, and if they do live as long or outlive their parents, then they are predicted to be sicker with more chronic disease. We have a generation now of children who are addicted to screens and gaming, brought up in a consumerist society which promotes a never-ending desire for instant gratification. Jamie Oliver is famous for having gone into schools to see if he could improve school dinners and if children knew where their food came from. Sadly, they didn't, And even though he went to great pains to tell them and show them what exactly a chicken nugget is made of, he was literally in despair to see that the children still said that they would continue to eat it. I think one of the most limiting factors of Western thinking is that the mind and body are separate entities. I don't think any anatomist, psychologist, or chemist truly knows where the mind begins and the body ends. The most informative years of a child's life are those of their childhood, specifically early childhood. Many of our children today have stresses that we did not have in our generation. We didn't have cyberbullying on mobile phones, meaning that we could be reached at any time at all, day or night. The children are living with constant tiredness, many up till all night on games and then getting up again in the morning for school. Malnourishment means they have difficulty in concentrating, erratic behaviour, and they may suffer from anxiety or stress. Some even suffer depression and sleeping disorders. And then there are problems such as attention deficit disorder, autism, hyperactivity, and dyslexia. Or simply that they're not reaching their potential in school or at home because the way they feel makes it impossible for them to focus and learn. This is the best time of life to teach Yang Sheng and the nourishment of their life, respect for their body, and how to deal with their emotions and feelings. The things that we've discussed today, you will be able to pass on to your family, and hopefully we will have a generation of children growing up with an understanding of health, nutrition, and well-being. Not many of us are taught how to eat. Early in the 1970s and 80s, it was 3 meals a day, and you ate then and didn't really get anything in between. It's only now that people tend to constantly snack or eat every 2 to 3 hours. However, it's best to stop eating when you are 7/10 full. It is a Chinese saying regarding the amount that is to be eaten. There are other sayings in other cultures. In the Islamic medicine field, it is said that the stomach should be 1/3 food, 1/3 for drink, and 1/3 for air. Sadly, we have lost the hand-me-downs of generations by our ancestors of how they used to eat, and we and our children are bombarded by a seductive food advertisement from things that are not healthy, such as McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, for the latest microwave TV dinner made by Marks and Spencer's, or Iceland, and many of us opt for these due to life and work commitments. We choose over health and the effort required to prepare food that is nutrient dense. However, I'd like to say that it's a bit of a myth. It's not very difficult to have a diet that is nutrient dense and healthy in a busy lifestyle. Hopefully, I'll be able to show you some hacks during these presentations. As our countries have got wealthier, in the West, portions of food have grown somewhat in size, and the normal diet of the 1960s and 70s has been turned on its head. Our diets commonly now contain a large amount of rich foods that have strong tastes, and we only often eat a small proportion of vegetables, beans, and grains, which ironically should be the staple part of our diet. Chinese medicine considers richer foods such as animal products, dairy, and other fats to be special. That is extremely nourishing, but only in small quantities. Therefore, meats and fatty rich foods should be a garnish rather than the centre place of our dish. If we compare our diet today to the average British diet in 1948, we now eat 50% more meat, twice as much cheese, but less than half as much bread, potatoes, and other carbohydrates. In this slide, you can see the Chinese body clock and how it is linked to organs and elements. In future slides, we will discuss caloric restriction and how this is being proven to increase longevity and health. I think that it can go even further when the intermittent fasting and eating windows take into consideration the Chinese medical body clock, and this will be discussed later on when we look at intermittent fasting. I thought we'd take a look at some food pyramids of how it would be better we ate versus how we actually eat in Western society. On the left is the Okinawan longevity diet, and you can see 2/3 of the plate is taken up by sweet potatoes or carbs. 12% is rice, another 7% is grains and wheat, and then they have vegetables, fruits and oils. But I'd like you to take a look at the diet. It's actually only about 1% meat, 1% fish and 1% dairy. This is a very healthy diet. It's no wonder they're one of the longest lived and healthiest peoples on the planet. On the right hand side is a fun look at how a lot of people in society do actually eat. So as you can see, the bottom of this pyramid is takeaways, maybe some frozen food a few days a week, followed by copious amounts of chocolate when stressed, and then caffeine to wake us up and get us going in the morning before work. Which is healthier? Which one would make you live longer? The British food pyramid, I believe, has flaws in it. Let's take a look at it on the next slide. This is an image of the British Eat Well plate. One of the problems I find with this plate is that it makes no differentiation between refined and unrefined carbohydrates. Some carbohydrates, particularly the refined kind, found in white bread or white flour products, such as pasta, are broken down into sugars much more quickly than others. Their breakdown and absorption into the bloodstream is even faster. Is that important, you ask? The IQ research at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the US found a massive 25% difference between the IQ scores of children who were in the top fifth of the population for consumption of sugar and other refined carbohydrates compared with children who were in the bottom fifth. So staying away from white bread, processed cereals and sugars seems to be crucial to having balanced blood sugar levels, which then equals balanced emotional states, as there's no hyperglycemia setting in. It's very important that we all have that even supply of glucose to the brain, which then allows us to learn better. The vegetable portion of the plate is good, but very few people eat that amount of vegetables. The milk and dairy portion, however, I believe is too big. There has been a link to Western consumption of milk and dairy to osteoporosis and breast cancer, and you can read more about this in Colin Campbell's very good book, The China Study. Patrick Holford also has some amazing books on nutrition and their different health issues. A particularly good book is his Optimum Nutrition. All from a Western perspective, obviously, but he does give some of the science in terms that are easy to understand, and they have a prominent space on my bookshelf. My favourite food pyramid, even though I'm not vegan, is the vegan food pyramid for sheer diversity of carbohydrates and vegetables that they have on this pyramid is amazing. I love that it's based on hydration. Now, I believe our bodies know how much fluid we need to drink, but many people choose the wrong drinks, such as caffeinated beverages, for the kick, or sodas, instead of health-giving water or tea. So the fact that the very bottom of the pyramid is water shows the importance of healthy hydration. And this is followed by loads of vegetables and then complex carbohydrates. I think a good middle road would be to have the top tiny triangle halved, and if people are not vegan, then the meat and dairy products should be here, as well as the sugars, sweets or cakes. Calorie restriction and intermittent fasting. In 1935, the first study was done on caloric restriction using rats, put on a restricted but nutritionally complete diet. They attained extreme ages beyond those of normally fed rats. It's important to understand that calorie-restricted diet must be nutritionally complete, and if it's not, then it will cause starvation, sickness, and even death. Properly managed caloric restriction appears to offer some surprising outcomes. A leader in this field today is Dr. Jason Fung. I recommend you to take a look at his videos over on YouTube. He does some very good talks on caloric restriction and intermittent fasting and different health issues. Because of our much longer lifespans, any experiments on humans have yet to yield results. However, human studies are currently underway, and they do show beneficial changes in a range of biomarkers, especially those related to cardiovascular disease and regulation of glucose. Digestive diseases are among the most common of all disorders. In 2010, around 20% of the US population suffered from them at a cost in 2004 of over $140 billion. The most common of these are chronic constipation, diverticular disease, irritable bowel syndrome, peptic ulcers, and gastroesophageal reflux disease, which manifests with heartburn, nausea, and regurgitation. A recent study has suggested that people using proton pump inhibitors, which are indicated for heartburn and acid reflux and a commonly taken drug, are a fifth more likely to suffer from heart attacks and at a significantly greater risk of developing B12 deficiency. If we want our digestive system to function well throughout our lives, and we need it to if we are to look after our body and remain healthy, then we need to take care of it. One of the ways we can do this is with the way we eat, and by eating on a regular basis. Regular eating is made up with a number of factors. It's not only when we eat, but how we eat that is very important for our digestion. Eating on the run being one of the worst ways we can eat. Sitting down to eat and focusing on our food rather than standing, walking, or driving in a car encourages good digestion. We should eat when we are relaxed and peaceful, and shouldn't eat when we're angry, stressed, rushed, or absorbed in business discussions. We should eat slowly and chew thoroughly, as eating fast can nearly triple the risk of developing type 2 diabetes and contributes to obesity, while slow eating and chewing the food well results in a reduction of the amount eaten at a meal and can help people lose weight. Stagnation of food in the body leads to damp. Common symptoms of damp are feeling heavy, being fatigued, having brain fog, or being sleepy, and having difficulty in concentrating. There are a few ancient sayings on eating and how we should eat. There is a Jewish saying, eat your breakfast alone, share your lunch with a friend, and give your supper to your enemy. The Chinese say, eat a hearty breakfast, a moderate lunch, and a small supper. My favourite is that we should eat to live and not live to eat. Diet is simply how and what we eat as a regular part of our life, not something we do to lose weight. We shouldn't eat to excess and should only eat when we are hungry. This is a good way to obtain optimal weight. When we feel hungry, we should take a small drink of water first. A small glass of water before food helps the body produce hydrochloric acid in the stomach to digest the food we eat. Sometimes hunger and thirst can be confused by the body, and often when we feel hungry, it can in actuality be thirst. When we have a small glass of water before food, we are enabling our body to fill our stomach with adequate levels of hydrochloric acid to digest the food we are going to eat. Food is divided into 5 tastes in Chinese medicine. These tastes are sweet, sour, bitter, acrid, and salty. Each is linked to one of the 5 principal organs: lung, spleen, heart, kidney, and liver. A diet which is seeking to balance the internal body should encompass them all, avoiding excess in one taste and having each taste in every meal. Lots of books on vegetarianism and veganism and its health benefits are available today. One particular book I really enjoyed was The China Study by Colin Campbell. This book goes into detail on the benefits of a vegetarian diet. I teach my children and grandchildren that we do not live to eat, but we eat to live, and most things in moderation are okay, except of course junk food. That's banned. There are some very, very good Chinese books on healthy foods, such as Prince Wen's cookbook and the Book of Juk. Alcohol doesn't need to be totally avoided, but needs to be only in moderation. And when we eat, we should make sure we eat all colours of the rainbow. Green tea is my favourite beverage. The Tea Discourse of 1539 states the effect of drinking tea quenches the thirst and aids digestion, dissolves phlegm and reduces sleep. It promotes the elimination of water, brightens the eyes and benefits the brain. It dispels worries and counteracts fatty foods. It is something we cannot do without every day. So here you can see historically green tea has been known for its many benefits and today has become widely consumed. Another Chinese proverb is drinking a daily cup of tea will surely starve the apothecary. Historically in China, tea was drunk primarily as a medicine. By contrast, in Europe, the early popularity of tea drinking generated fears of the beverage actually damaging the health. Westerners believed in excess it would lead to weakness and melancholy. However, the wholesomeness of drinking tea, being a welcome alternative to alcohol, gradually gained ground. The benefits of drinking tea have been so well researched and are so well known that it can now be called one of the healthiest drinks in the world, as long as you don't put milk in it. Green and black tea both have their benefits. After all, they come from the same plant, just the leaves have been treated differently to result in the green or black tea. Both contain similar amounts of antitoxic flavonoids. Green teas contain more catechins, although research by the US Department of Agriculture has suggested that levels of the antioxidants in green tea and black tea don't really differ greatly. From a Chinese perspective, black and pu'er teas are more warming than green and white tea, which are cool. Teas become warmer as they oxidize. Tea should also be drank at certain times of the day. For instance, green teas are energizing and therefore should be drunk in the morning and early afternoon when the qi of the body is rising. Black tea is something for the afternoon and evening as the qi is reducing. Pu'er tea is usually drunk when eating oily food, and nearly every restaurant I ever went to in China, jasmine was the tea of choice that they served free of charge to everyone who went in. So it's not only food that you can use to benefit your health, it's also what you drink, how you drink it, and when you drink it. It is a well-known fact that exercise is good for you. It lengthens our lives, keeps our joints healthy, releases endorphins, and makes us feel happier. A lack of physical activity is one of the greatest contributors to virtually every kind of disease, including the shortening of our lifespan, as well as mental and physical decline in old age. The UK Department of Health Start Active, Stay Active in 2011 emphasised that beyond the simple consequence of having a physically and mentally healthy population, getting more people to actually take exercise dramatically reduced health costs that would be associated with chronic disease. It would improve productivity, and if walking and cycling are to be encouraged, then would also reduce environmental pollution. Why exercise? Exercise has been well researched and shows results such as health improvement, more chance of reaching a healthy old age, having a better function of your heart and lungs, and an improved immune system. Exercise helps in weight management and strengthens bones and muscles, lessening the chances of osteoporosis. There is an old Chinese saying, "The hinge that is used never rusts," and you can look to exercise as a demonstration for this in the body. Joints and muscles of someone who exercises on a regular basis will be more flexible, and they will be less likely to suffer from age-related loss of function. There are many ways to bring exercise into your life, and this should be done so with regard to your age and health status. It could be something as easy as taking a brisk walk to the shops, walking up the stairs at the tube station, or in a building or office instead of taking the lift, or parking some distance from where you are going and then walking the rest of the way.
In times like now, when there are lockdowns and gyms are not open, it's great to see that there are many online workouts to choose from. These can be done in the comfort of our own home. And if you look at the wisdom for taking the time out of your sometimes busy schedule to exercise, you can look at a questionnaire done in 1980, which evaluated the daily physical activity of 17,944 middle-aged British civil servants. 8 years later, a follow-up survey was taken. It was found that the incidence of heart disease was 50% less in those who'd had a more active lifestyle. If you are suffering from a chronic condition that makes other more taxing forms of exercise impossible, then just walking. Walking is amazing for health. There's a famous Chinese text that has a special section just on walking. It points out that walking relaxes the muscles and tendons, it strengthens the limbs, and promotes digestion. It calms the mind. Modern research backs this up. A study at Alberta University found that walking, even at a low intensity, caused people to burn fat and lose weight. From a Chinese medicine perspective, walking and exercise in general, it stimulates the movement of qi in our body and gives us energy. A very gentle form of exercise, suitable for most people of most ages, is Tai Chi or Qi Gong. These exercises work not only with the body, but also with the qi, and there are many health benefits, as well as many online classes or videos, making it something that's quite easy to look into. The Taoist immortals were famous in China for having very long life, and they're also very well known for the practice of internal exercises such as Tai Chi, Ba Gua, and Qi Gong. These exercises have the potential to both promote health and heal the body. I never forget my first trip to China. I was woken up at 7 a.m. to really loud music, and then on taking a look from my window, I could see the workers outside from offices and shops with their managers doing their morning exercise. It didn't end there either. When we got up and went out to the parks, we saw aged people, lots of pensioners doing their Tai Chi and their exercises in the park. And this is a daily part of their health routine. It was stunning to see how healthy most of the aged population is in China. Either Tai Chi or Qi Gong have been shown to have many health benefits. This can be from improving renal and cardiac function in kidney and heart disease patients to improving lung function and reducing blood pressure. This kind of internal exercise can improve the symptoms of many chronic diseases and can help improve chronic fatigue. It can reduce fatigue in cancer survivors, improve sleep, reduce stress, and improve intention in young adults, cognitive function in the older generation. A more detailed review of the Tai Chi research, if this is of interest to you, can be found, as well as some of the science behind its benefits, in the Harvard Medical School Guide to Tai Chi. Another way to learn Tai Chi would be to go where the Taoist Yang Sheng exercises originated, in Wudang Mountain. A very important part of life nourishment is sleep. There is a Chinese saying, the loss of one night's sleep is followed by 10 days of inconvenience. Sleep is restorative. It regulates our emotions. It regulates our mind. 1/3 of our life is spent sleeping. When we sleep well, we wake up to a new day and find ourselves restored. We find our minds are nourished and our bodies mended from what we have done the day before. Restorative sleep is vital to our health and our well-being. When we sleep badly or too little, we wake up and face life exhausted, and we are often unrepaired in our body. We function poorly and our immune system has been weakened. There is clear evidence that if we sleep badly over a prolonged period, then we die earlier. Therefore, sleep is a very important part of Yang Sheng. So what effect does a lack of sleep have on us? In the United Kingdom, the Great British Sleep Survey in 2012 revealed that 75% of women and 25% of men and the majority of the elderly had problems sleeping, the number one cause of which was a racing mind. Worry about sleep, business itself. The poorest sleepers were 7 times more likely to feel helpless, 5 times more likely to feel alone, and 2 to 3 times more likely to suffer from low mood and have problems concentrating. They would struggle to be productive and have relationship problems and experience fatigue. There is also a marked relationship between poor sleep and obesity. Sleep is when our body repairs, especially between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. These are known as the hours of power. It's best to retire early and rise early than work late into the night. How much sleep do we need? The National Sleep Foundation guidelines advise that healthy adults need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep per night. Babies, young children and teens need even more sleep to enable their growth and development. People over 65 should also get 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep per night. So blockages to a good night's sleep can be many. There are certain behaviours that we can address that will help us get a good night's sleep. It's well known that eating late or a large meal close to bedtime can be injurious to our digestive systems and contribute to obesity. Eating late and then going to bed also causes GERD, as the food in the stomach has not been digested enough before lying down, and therefore pushes up on the cardiac sphincter, weakening the muscle over time, resulting in esophageal reflux. There are many opinions that sleep position can affect the quality of sleep. Books on nourishing life and in Unani medicine state that lying on the side with the knees drawn up helps regain energy better than lying on one's back, and in Unani medicine the right side is favoured. If you suffer from sleep apnea, then sleeping on the side is definitely recommended, as it is when pregnant. If you're suffering from insomnia, there is a thought that washing or soaking the feet in hot water before bedtime promotes healthy sleep. This is that it's said it redirects the energy that may be rising to the head to the feet and brings that energy back down to the lower part of the body, enabling you to sleep. If you have pillows, it's best to avoid pillows that are excessively high. There are traditions in different cultures of sleeping on herbal pillows. I came back from China with a massive pillow made with tea from one of my son's shifus. Different herbs can be used in these pillows. For example, chrysanthemum for people who suffer with headaches and red eyes and dizziness, or tea leaves for high blood pressure, dried mint for headaches and throat disorders, and lavender to help you relax, or hops to help you sleep. Things such as avoiding coffee and strong tea before bedtime, because these can cause energy to rise up and wake you when you're meaning to be slowing down, ready for sleep. Best to do exercise early in the evening rather than late at night. Siestas, although not common in Western countries, are common throughout Europe and in China and Japan. In fact, sleeping at work in Japan is accepted, as it makes the boss know that his workers are working so hard they're getting tired. In China, there is a 2 to 4 hour lunch break. I think we broke up from school at 12 and then the next lesson would start at 4. All students were expected to go to their rooms after lunch and sleep. They were not permitted to be out in the yard and expected to rest in the room if they could not sleep. If you suffer from insomnia and do not meditate already, then maybe meditation is something you could try, as the effects of meditation on sleep can occur quite rapidly, with benefits being seen within 6 weeks. These benefits were equal to those found through cognitive behavioural therapy and sleep medication, both of which are more expensive and more dependent options, and in the case of medication, not without side effects. In Chinese medicine, sleep is one of the manifestations of Shen, which the translation is mind or spirit. Our mind or spirit is stored in our heart. Storage of Shen is a function of blood and yin, and when these are abundant,
the spirit is stored in a stable manner, and the mind is quietened easier. If we are blood deficient, then the mind becomes restless and agitated. How do you know signs of blood deficiency? Signs of blood deficiency insomnia are on the next slide. In TCM, insomnia stems from an imbalance. This imbalance can be of our energy, our yin or our yang qi, or it could be something such as a blood deficiency. Symptoms of blood deficiency can be insomnia, palpitations, pale face, and dizziness. It is important to make sure our diets are as nourishing as possible and that we have good eating habits and avoid coffee, alcohol, and spicy fatty foods late at night. It is important to sleep well, as sleep quality directly affects our mental and physical health and has an impact on our emotional stability and productivity during the day. Unfortunately, we do not have a sleep on/off button, and falling asleep can be much harder than anticipated. An important thing to do is to be in touch with our body's needs. So this means listening to its signals and sleeping at a time when we initially feel tired, rather than watching the last part of the film or video on YouTube or Tumblr. Screens are best avoided late at night, as the blue light emitted by the cell phone, TV or computer screen affects the production of the hormone melatonin, which then affects your sleep and wake cycle. This can lead to overstimulation. When the body is overstimulated, the brain is flooded with neurochemicals that keep us awake, such as epinephrine and adrenaline, making it difficult to wind down at the end of the day. It is best to avoid screens altogether for an hour or two before bedtime. This is the best time to read a book or meditate to help facilitate a good night's sleep. In ancient times, the Taoist masters would be consulted by the emperors and empresses for learning the essentials of sexual practice. Taoist masters were not consulted in secret just to enhance pleasure. It was more specifically for attaining a long and healthy life. China from the earliest times had some of the first sex manuals. These books were poetic and offered advice on sexual life corresponding to the Tao. They discussed how to maximize pleasure for the woman and invigorate and strengthen the man. They contained prescriptions and practices for stimulation of female desire or for curing impotence and how to maintain virility into a ripe old age. From the earliest times, the management of sexual energy has been associated with high vitality, strong senses, a sharp mind, vibrant health, and the ability to prolong life. In Taoist Yang Sheng practices, excessive sex is not good, and in the Chinese health tradition, sexual energy was considered far too powerful to expend purely for one's pleasure. The Taoist manuals claimed that the man and the woman could increase energy and longevity by making love. Sex in its most basic concept was considered joyous and intimate, as long as it was not indulged in excessively. Men would be taught to refrain from excessive sex and taught sex without ejaculation as they aged. This was known as seed saving and thought to preserve the Jing. According to Vedic science, 1 drop of semen is equal to 60 drops of blood on the energy it provides to the body. Retention of semen is one of the fundamental tenets of Taoist sexual practices. If you're interested in learning more on this subject, then Live Well, Live Long has a very informative chapter on the affairs of the bedroom and is the best book I have read on longevity practices. It's published by the Journal of Chinese Medicine. Mantak Chia also has some books on Taoist sexual practices. An aphrodisiac is a substance to increase desire. They have been used for centuries and were mainly focused on men. Some substances traditionally used as aphrodisiacs have been strange or exotic, from both plant and animal origin, including ginseng, epimedium, deer velvet, dried gecko, or from the half-insect, half-plant world, cordyceps. Not all of the things I have mentioned above
are aphrodisiacs. Rather, they are sexual tonics. A sexual tonic works slower than an aphrodisiac and works slowly to increase desire and potency and can benefit both men and women. Chinese doctors have issued stern warnings about the misuse of strong sexual stimulants. Studies today have shown that when taken recreationally by young men with no erectile dysfunction, aphrodisiacs can cause psychological dependence. It will take time for us to know whether the Chinese medicine warnings of potential physical damage of overuse of aphrodisiacs will be correct or not. The best defense for most things is knowledge, which is why there is a saying that knowledge is power. Knowledge that our health is primarily in our own hands gives us power over our health and well-being. The idea that nutrition can help with health conditions and that food can be used as medicine is about as radical as you can get in our modern society of pills for every ill, drug for every bug, radiation for every mutation, and cut, burn, poison, nothing more we can do. Next, medical model. Medicine has its place for acute conditions, definitely. But for chronic conditions, look to the works of Max Gerson, Bernard Jensen, and Patrick Holford for some nutritional protocols for chronic illnesses or tips on optimal nutrition. For those interested in the links of the gut to behaviour and psychology, the book Gut Psychology Syndrome is amazing. Keeping our emotions in check is the best way to stay mentally healthy. The understanding that emotional responses are normal and should be honoured and worked through rather than repressed or overindulged in. Respecting and accepting our feelings should be a huge part of our lives. Lastly, keeping the management of our health in our own hands, being proactive, is now more important than ever. I hope this video can be a first step in introducing you to Yang Sheng, or the Nourishment of Life. Thank you for joining me. I hope to see you next time.